All right, welcome everybody to the summer meeting of the Lake Country Clean Waters quarterly meeting. It's good to have everybody here. It's a little smaller meeting. I didn't realize we'd be competing with the Milwaukee Bucks tonight, so I definitely got a couple emails of people who are going to the Bucks game. No worries there. We're going to record it and put it on the website. So I'm excited that everyone could make it and excited to move forward. We have Erik and Heidi presenting tonight, both with really awesome presentations that I'm super excited to hear them present here. So, quick agenda for tonight. I'll do a really short introduction and a couple of updates for Lake Country Clean Waters. Then Erik Hanson will go next. He's the new AIS coordinator from Washington and Waukesha counties. And then Heidi Bunk, who's a lakes biologist for the Wisconsin DNR, will finish it up and then also answer any questions that you guys have after. So first things first, we did this last time and I thought it was really fun. So I think we should do it again. So we'll go and do a quick impromptu network party. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna assign us all to a breakout room. We're gonna have about 3 to 4 people per room. What all you have to do here is, we exist, Lake Country Clean Waters exists to be a networking opportunity for everyone in Lake Country. We want you guys to be able to share what's going on in your lakes, share what you like to do on your lakes, what your favorite activities are, and just where you are in Lake Country. So you'll be placed randomly in a call with 3 to 4 people and just share your name, what organization you're with, and then either something you have done on the water this summer that you've enjoyed, maybe it was water yoga, like in the picture, or something that you plan to do maybe over the 4th of July weekend on the water. So I will break us out into rooms right now. We'll be in the rooms only for about 2 minutes. So after about 2 minutes, I'll summon us all back to this main room here. So here we go. You'll see a thing just hit accept room. All right, looks like everybody's coming back. Some smiles on their faces, that's good. Feel free to stay off camera if you want to. It's totally fine. So I'm curious, who thinks they had the most interesting thing that they're doing on the water this summer? Does anybody want to go? Or something that they heard from somebody else?
Well, this is Jim Keller. Heidi Bunk says she just saw a loon not too long ago, which is pretty late in the season. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Oh, that's really cool.
Joyce, what about you? What did you hear in our talk? I think all of the people on our call were just excited about being on the water and just enjoying what they normally do in summer, which past COVID, that's pretty cool.
Definitely. Totally agree. It's just nice to be on the water at all. I haven't been able to be on the water too much. I did get to do a little bit of boating, which has been nice, and a little bit of kayaking this summer so far. So it's been nice. All right, cool. So Caroline, thank you for sharing. I wanted to share who's on our board. And so since Caroline was just speaking, she's one of them, Caroline Joyce. We also have Joyce Shepit, who's our treasurer, Susan Buchanan, Caroline, Jeff Lee, Don Gallo, and Jesse Jensen, and looks like his name got cut off, but the guy on the bottom is Jesse. So I just wanted to share who's on our board. We are always looking for board members. If people are interested, please feel free to reach out. And with that, so I'm curious from all of you guys, and I really want to get a screenshot of who's all on the call. So I'm going to have us do one more activity before we dive into just a couple announcements, and then Erik and Heidi. So if you see where somewhere on your screen, and I don't know if you're on an iPad if you're going to be able to do this, but where it says view options next to like you're viewing Bradley Steckert's screen, it'll say view options, and then you'll see, if you click on that, you'll see annotate icon with a little pencil picture, and then you'll see a text box. So if you can, go to that annotate and go to that text box and type in here somewhere on this page, what lake, river, or other organization are you representing here on this call?
Hmm.
And once again, if you go to view options on your screen, it should say like you're viewing Bradley Steckard's screen, and then you should be able to hit that down arrow, and then you'll see an annotate function. Once you do that, there's text.
So Brad, so everybody, it's at the top of your screen, view options.
Oh,
Yeah, I know it looks different to me because I'm presenting.
Does that include on an iPad?
I don't see it on my iPad.
Yeah, I don't.
You might have to swipe on your iPad to the right screen.
what comes after view options?
View options.
Got
You'll see
more
an annotate.
chat, meeting settings, perhaps? No. Background filters, disconnect, audio, raise hand. Guess I'm not alone. Oh, yeah, there's one down here. It's just Bradley's screen. I got that.
There you go. Couldn't get close. I'm trying to. There you go. We're getting a few here.
Oh, wait a second. I saw some character- oh, that was
Brad,
his
after
character
view
sheet.
options, what do you check on?
After view options, there'll be this annotate button.
Okay, and then after that's text. Okay, is
Yeah,
that right?
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see any view options on the iPad.
Oh, that's okay. You can just say it out loud. If you can't do the annotate, you can just say it out loud too.
Okay.
I can write it for you.
Yeah, this is Dee Schreiber. I'm on an iPad and I'm with Waukesha Lake Management Association.
And
I'm
this is
Paul
John-
Keenan. I'm with Lower Nemaben.
John Baritsky, Middle Genesee Lake Management District.
Caroline Joyce, Wisconsin Lakes.
Gary Hine with North Lake Management District.
Nice.
And Jim Keller, Lower Nemaben Lake Association.
I'm losing my mouse here, so they're getting kind of crammed together.
Jennifer Reek from the Upper Nemaben Lake Management District.
What was the last one, Jen?
Hello, you talk to me?
Yep.
I'm from the Upper Nemaben Lake Management District. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. I got
Okay.
it. I shortened yours. So cool. Good. Wow, look at this. This is awesome. We have Lower Nemaben. Oh, this is so cool. Okay, I'm taking a screenshot of this so we can see where we're at. I thought this would be really cool just to see like the diversity of lakes that we're representing and organizations that we're representing in just in our area. It's just really cool to know that this many people care about our lakes and our. So I'm going to now have to clear all these. Okay. Okay, so just a reminder of what we do here at Lake Country Clean Waters. We host 3 quarterly meetings and a Healthy Lakes Conference. Last year, we were able to host over 200 attendees at our different events with over 20 experts and professional presenters presenting on 15 water-related conservation topics. And some highlighted presentations where I know Heidi presented last year, so we're excited to have her back. We had people from the UW-Milwaukee Freshwater Science, UW Extension, Army Corps of Engineers, Washington and Waukesha County professionals, Sewer PAC, which is the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, the Department of Natural Resources, Wisconsin Lakes, and also some accomplished authors, which is pretty cool. Last year we had 5 donors, and just to say we do all of this through partnerships with Tall Pines Conservancy, the Oconomowoc Water Protection Program, Wisconsin Lakes, the Department of Natural Resources, and our other partners. And we operate with only one part-time employee and a volunteer board of directors. So some cool things that we're up to now, moving forward. We have this awesome brochure. Caroline was just showing us what it looks like in real life. And we'll have some brochures this weekend at Lake Country Clean Waters Festival, which will be the first time I get to see them printed out on the nice paper. So it looks really cool. It's got what we do, our mission, some networking opportunities, and also a form to donate. So it's pretty sweet. You can see Jim's right here on the brochure. You made it, man. You made it in life. You're on the brochure. So this is pretty exciting stuff. We do run entirely off of donations. So many of you have donated. We welcome anybody who hasn't to donate and help fund the cause to keep our lakes and rivers clean and pristine. We're basically funded until the Healthy Lakes and Rivers Conference. We've made it through this meeting, and now we're kind of getting funded shoestring style, meeting to meeting. So now we're funded through the Healthy Lakes and Rivers Conference, and we're trying to get funded through the end of the year. So we'll continue to seek out sponsorships for the conference that's coming up, and we'll continue to seek donations from lake groups. So if you haven't talked to your lake or river organization about donating to Lake Country Clean Waters, please feel free to bring this to the table. We are happy to come and chat with you guys and tell you what we're up to and why it's important to be a communicator between all these different lake and river organizations. If you're curious, this is our donation structure. You can find this on our sponsorship structure, I should say. You can find this on our website, and feel free to contact me directly with any questions about any of this. And so we're going to be seeking sponsorships, especially corporate sponsorships. So if you know anyone on your lake who's part of an organization that promotes conservation initiatives, grants, sponsorships, or any professionals that would like to speak at meetings or conferences, feel free to contact us, and we can set that up and get ready to go. So with that, our next after this meeting is the Healthy Lakes and Rivers Conference, and that is September 17th. Looks like the slide bled over a little bit there, but that's okay. So normally in a normal non-COVID year, we would have had our Healthy Lakes and Rivers Conference in June. So this meeting would essentially be the Healthy Lakes and Rivers Conference, but because of COVID and things happening like that, we are now having it in September. So it's going to be Friday, September 17th. From 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Registration will start at 8 a.m. We're going to have North Lake Management District drone-based study, AIS, starry stonewort efficacy studies in Wisconsin, different starry stonewort presentations from a Lake District perspective, and also the 2021 Lakes and Rivers Award. So you can register here. I will put that in the chat. I think this is it here. It is not, so let me get that in the chat here. So you can register for the conference at this link right here. And also you'll find that at lakecountrycleanwaters.org. And then I wanted Joyce to talk about the Friday and Saturday, June 25th and 26th, the Lake Country Clean Water Festival. So we're actually, this is this upcoming weekend, and this is something that we're associated with. So Joyce, if you want to take it away and talk about this a little bit.
Sure. This is the 10th year that the Pewaukee Lake Water Ski Club has hosted the Lake Country Clean Water Festival. It's being held in conjunction with the Pewaukee Kiwanis Beach Party, which has been going on now for 25 years. So the main focus of the festival is helping to educate the public a little bit more about the lakes and what we can do, you know, to preserve and protect them, and how our actions have, all of our actions have an impact on the lake. So we are going to have a large tent right on the beach on Pewaukee Lake in downtown Pewaukee, with about 14 different groups that will have displays on different areas of lake conservation. So Brad will be there if you would like to come and meet Brad in person. Lake Country Clean Waters will have a table. The Milwaukee UWM School of Freshwater Sciences will be there. University of Wisconsin Extension Lakes. Carroll University is going to do a presentation on freshwater mussels and how they are an endangered species and what they can tell us about the health of our lakes. The Pewaukee River Partnership, the Walleyes for Tomorrow. So just a really good group of organizations that are educating both children and adults. It's geared for both on our lakes. And then in addition to that, there's some fun water activities that people can participate in. There'll be learn to ski lessons. There's an adaptive ski demonstration. Koha yoga will be there with their paddle boards. People can paddleboard for free. There are pontoon boat rides for people who don't, like most of us have the opportunity to get on the water. And then of course the Kiwanis has their beach party going on. So it's a big street party as well. So we're hoping that if you have some time, come down to the lakefront in Pewaukee on Saturday, and keeping our fingers crossed for some good weather, and we'll have a good time.
Awesome. Thanks, Joyce.
You bet.
All right. Just one more thing. We are going to have at the September 17th meeting, we're going to have our Lake and River Organization Annual Recognition Award. So last year, North Lake Management District won it. It's this cool paddle with a plaque that comes with it. The paddle is passed along from organization to organization throughout the years. So every year somebody new will win it. Or maybe the same person would win it twice. But you can actually apply to win it and tell us a little bit about what your lake or river organization has done. So you can actually find that application at lakecountrycleanwaters.org. Toot your own horn, like be proud of what your lake and or river organization has done, and feel free to apply for that. So that is that. So moving forward, also we're planning to do a calendar photo contest. So if you have cool photos of your lake, we've received a couple really good ones. And so if you have photos to send to us, you can send photos into info@lakecountrycleanwaters.org. We'll choose the top 12 photos to be in a calendar next year. We're excited to do that. And you can also send us some reasons if you think your lake should be featured as Lake of the Month. So we like to have sort of inside information on what's going on in the lakes, and not just what we can find like on the DNR website. So if you have like cool facts about your lake, maybe some cool historic features or something, we'd love to know that too. And then just moving forward, so June 25th and 26th, we have Lake Country Clean Waters Festival, and then our Healthy Lakes Conference is Friday, September 17th, just to reiterate that. All right, so let's get to the presentations. We have Erik and Heidi. We'll start with Erik Hanson. So Erik is the AIS coordinator for Washington and Waukesha counties. He has been there, man, Erik, probably not even a whole month yet. But he's, from what I know, and you can totally correct me if I'm wrong, Erik, this is what I stole from Paul Stevo sending me your resume. You're from Missoula. You have state AIS coordinator experience, PhD in environmental science, a master's in environmental management, and a Bachelor of Science in biology. And I won't read your whole track record, but holy cow, I was pumped to see all of the cool stuff that you've been involved in and been doing. And we're excited and honored to have you in Wisconsin. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll let you go ahead and share yours.
Well, thank you, Brad. And I am really excited to be here in Wisconsin. One of the things that I'm really excited about is that there's so many active AIS management projects going on here. That is very different in the West, where we're mostly focused on doing watercraft inspections. So it's going to be really nice to dive into some lakes and actually get involved with some local actions. For a lot of you on the call, I haven't had the opportunity yet to reach out to you. I will. I am looking forward to getting to know you, getting to know your lakes, and all the work that's been going on. So a little bit about me. I started to cut my teeth at the Center for Lakes and Reservoirs in Portland, Oregon, where I was involved in multiple management projects on lakes, aquatic invasive species. It was really where I got my interest in dealing with aquatic invasive species because it was a natural resource issue that wasn't being adequately addressed. It's a major issue. In Montana, I worked with the Regional Flathead Basin Commission and also the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes, where I ran their AIS programs and represented them at the state and at regional levels. Here in my new job, my major role is to implement the Washington and Waukesha County AIS plan, but then also to serve as a resource. I see that as my major role as somebody that you can talk to, somebody that can come out at your lake and look at things, and then just help you out and be involved in your ongoing efforts to address aquatic invasive species. So one of the major things is aquatic invasive species management is very different here than out west. So the big thing out west is mussels. Zebra and quagga mussels. Because most Western states do not have them and are trying actively to keep them out, that is what is driving their programs, is to prevent the Western spread of zebra and quagga mussels. So, the Columbia River Basin is the last major watershed in the United States that doesn't have quagga mussels, and because it's such a connected river reservoir system, once it gets into that system, then it'll spread throughout all those Western states. So they're really focused on preventing the mussels from getting into that. And because of the economic impacts, that has really driven sort of the funding and the authority to address aquatic invasive species. So as an example, in Montana, almost 5 years ago, we had 2 reservoirs that popped up as positive for zebra mussels. And that initiated a $700,000 rapid response planning effort. And that was just planning, that was not implementation. And it increased the program from a $1.5 million program to a $5 million program with $1.5 million annually for containment. So one reservoir, it took $1 million a year to contain, and the other reservoir was $500,000. And that was simply running watercraft inspection stations at the boat ramps to ensure that every boat that left those reservoirs was inspected and cleaned, so they weren't spreading mussels further. So you can see that threat of zebra mussels really gets a response out there, but it's also driving everything. So the Western states in general have agreed to quarantine positive waters because they don't have mussels. And so if you get a positive water in Western states, basically that water is going to be quarantined for 5 years, which is typically a mandatory inspection of departing watercraft. So that's a major request of states to have to do that. Again, like $1 million to contain a watercraft reservoir. So a big thing that the states have agreed to quarantine positive waters. The issue is for out there is overall what happens is you're driven by that mussel response. So 70% of your budget and time is for watercraft inspection, and only 15% for monitoring, which leaves very little time and effort to address other aquatic invasive species. I know with my work with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes, about 80% of my time was devoted just simply to running watercraft inspection stations. So one of the big things is how West has developed the regulatory authority to address watercraft inspections and aquatic invasive species. So the Western states got together, developed some model regulations that then would make for uniform regulations throughout the Western states, so that we are vetting our regulations as they move forward to make sure that they meet legal standards, and then that they're uniform. So boaters know what to expect as they move from state to state. Mostly it's state authority out west. You don't have as much local authorities to address aquatic invasive species. The big thing is mandatory inspection prior to launch. So most Western states require an inspection before you're allowed to launch your boat, which is a huge issue. And one of the differences out west than out here is fewer roads. So there's fewer places for boaters to get to the water, which makes it easier to mandate that mandatory inspection. And then the other thing is all watercraft must stop when encountering an inspection station. So the big difference is all the watercraft inspections in the West are mostly conducted on highways. So anybody driving down a highway that intercepts an inspection station then has to stop and be inspected. Because of geological barriers like the Continental Divide, there are fewer highway systems that boaters can travel, which makes it easier to ensure you're having inspection stations located where they're going to intercept all the traffic that heads to the lakes. And then at a station, a complete inspection is mandatory. So that means everything is getting inspected. A boat pulls in, they have to comply with that inspection. If they're not willing to comply, either law enforcement is called or that boat will be locked to the trailer and an inspection will be done further down the road. And then the local law enforcement has a legal authority to catch boaters that drive by the station. So with the stations I ran, we would call it into the county dispatch. That would go to the state highway patrol, local law enforcement, tribal police, county, and the state game wardens. So there we had a network of people that could catch those people and then bring them back to the watercraft inspection station to be inspected. So a lot of authority and a lot of effort to develop a system that will intercept boaters before they reach the waters. So some of the differences with Wisconsin that I've noticed so far is because the inspections is much more emphasized and that the inspections are mandatory, that there's been a lot more work to develop protocols and procedures to ensure that the inspections that happen. Again, it's mandatory, so oftentimes the inspection is emphasized. At the station, the boaters must remove the cover, lower the motor, open the live well, pull bilge plugs, and operate the ballast pumps. Those are all mandatory at the station. With training out west, all our watercraft inspectors go through 2-day training, which includes hands-on inspection and decontamination. So if watercraft pulls into the inspection station and its ballast tanks need to be flushed, the inspectors at the station have been trained to use the hot water decon unit to be able to do that. Also, they need to be able to recognize boat parts, recognize when a boat has a live well or it has a ballast intake, so that those parts of the boat are automatically inspected. And how to recognize when a boater turns on the ballast pumps for a wakeboard boat so that they can hear it and make sure that it's operating. So there's just some differences in terms of how watercraft inspections are done out west versus the Clean Boats, Clean Water. So just something we can learn from. Out west, there is a fair amount of coordination between the states. The states do communicate about watercraft inspection. And one of the interesting things that they've done over the last 5 years is they have a common app that they use for watercraft inspections. So if you start entering data into that app, you can see the inspection history of that boat. So if it's been in a mussel positive water, that will pop up. So then you need to know that you have to do a more thorough inspection. So it's a nice system that you can have on your phone to kind of check the history of a boat and also be able to have that sort of nice database for watercraft inspections and where boaters are moving, and just to verify inspection history. One one of the things that they've tried to do but haven't gotten to is to accept other states' inspections. That would be a nice thing, that once a boater goes through one state, then the next state they hit, they would honor that inspection. But due to quality control issues, they still haven't reached that point where they can accept other state inspections. However, all the states use the same training and certification. It's the WIT training there, watercraft inspection training, and there's different levels, WIT 1, 2, and 3, based on what you're qualified to do, whether you're qualified just to inspect boats, decontaminate boats, or train other people to inspect and decontaminate boats. And that sort of that effort between all the states to really work on watercraft inspection, it led to some uniform minimum protocols and a lot of organization. So there's 2 websites that people can go at to look at some of the coordination that has been done, and some of the, what they've gone through to look at what does it take to decontaminate a boat. So we have significant experience into going to boat manufacturers and going, okay, here's all the different designs of live wells or ballast tanks, and so how do we have a system to decontaminate all these different systems? So what it has led to, this is an image of all the watercraft inspection stations out west. Most of the dots are mandatory inspection stations. So there's a whole series of inspection stations as you move down the highways in the west that you will encounter. Each state in the west spends about $5 to $7 million right now for watercraft inspections. In terms of operation out there, because we're running mandatory inspections, we're trying to capture all the traffic. We tend to run them 12 to 16 hours a day. That takes 2 staff to run the inspection station at all times. So one of the stations I ran was a station that ran up the highway into the Flathead Basin to help protect Flathead Lake. So Flathead Lake is the largest freshwater lake west of the Mississippi River, a huge lake. And in terms of the tribes that I worked with, it was their Aboriginal land, and they owned the south half of that lake. We ran that one 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was the only 24-hour day station in Montana. During the week, we could run it with 2 staff, but on that weekends, we'd have 4 to 6 staff, 2 staff at night. We had a dedicated warden on site 7 days a week that could then run down people that drove by the station, and then to deal with any sort of non-compliance issues at the station. An agreement with local law enforcement to pull over drive-bys. So sometimes they would get up to the lake, which would be 35 miles away. They get pulled over by a local cop and then be directed back to the station, which could be a 2-hour turnaround time that they have. So, it's a significant time for drive-bys, and then they would also get a ticket, which was an $85 ticket for driving by the station. But that allowed us to intercept 80% of the motorized drive-bys, because the idea is intercepting all the traffic heading to the lake. And at that station, because we were running 24/7 with enforcement, we were intercepting 90 to 95% of the boat traffic headed to the lake. So in a way to measure our effectiveness at intercepting traffic and ensuring that those watercraft are inspected before they reach the lake. So wanted to touch on some legislation. One issue with aquatic invasive species that's kind of important to me, because it's always to me about managing risk, and what watercraft represent a greater risk of moving aquatic invasive species around. So this is a Montana House bill that I wrote, 608, to address wakeboard boats. And for those that don't know what wakeboard boats are, those are the boats that have internal tanks that they fill with water that allows them to sit really deep and throw up a huge wave that people can then surf behind. So it's becoming more and more popular, and you're seeing more and more people do it. But there's a huge threat of aquatic invasive species with these boats that can potentially move aquatic invasive species and water around. Most of the aquatic invasive species that we're concerned with were brought to the United States in ballast of ocean going cargo vessels. So as vessels move across the ocean and load their cargo, they fill up their ballast tanks with water in order to balance the ship. When they come over to the United States and Great Lakes, they unload that cargo, but then they dump that water out. So that's how a lot of aquatic invasive species got moved around. Wakeboards are similar, just a very much smaller scale because they are moving water from lake to lake. So wakeboard boats can transport hundreds of gallons of water. And unfortunately, the way they were designed, they were never designed to fully drain. So there can be easily 20 gallons of water left in the tank even after the pumps have been operated. And also the pumps don't operate like bilge pumps. Like if you're operating your bilge pump in the boat, you sit and you watch it. You watch it till the water stops coming out. With wakeboard boats, they're either on a timer or a gauge. And so they sometimes only operate for 2 minutes and then they shut off. So they don't necessarily remove all the water that's in the ballast tanks. At Western stations, it's not that uncommon to have a wakeboard boat pull into the station. You have them turn on their pumps and 80 gallons of water are pumped out. It is pretty incredible what people are driving down the road with in terms of the weight in their boat, and then also just the risk of aquatic invasive species. And so for me, and part of the reason I developed this bill was with all watercraft inspections, we have people lower the motor. That's part of the standard protocol for a boat inspection. And when you lower the motor, half cup to a cup of water drops out. And so we're saying that's a significant enough of a risk that we're asking boaters to lower their motors and drain their motors when they move from lake to lake. But we haven't addressed the risk from ballast water in these wakeboard boats. And even with a well-intentioned boater that turns on his pumps, he still may be moving 20 gallons of water around. And so we need to be able to start addressing this risk with aquatic invasive species. And just as a visual, you know, the small blue square represents a cup of water. That larger blue square represents 20 gallons of water. So it would take a lot of motors not being dropped to equal one wakeboard boat that moves from lake to lake. And so, you know, I look at how can we better address this? Certainly by making sure people turn on their pumps all the way, but then can we move further into this of developing a system, asking people to flush their ballast tanks between waters to help address that risk, because it is a huge risk and it poses a huge unknown for moving aquatic invasive species around. So House Bill 608, that's a link to the legislative bill. So it requires all watercraft with ballast tanks to have their tanks decontaminated before launching it from outside Montana or crossing the Continental Divide. You know, a lot of places require people to drain all their water, but this goes further because it requires that decontamination step. So again, that 20 gallons of residual water that may be in the tank, they have to go through a decontamination process to flush that water out to clean their tanks out. And then the other part about this is it requires the boat owners to document that they've been either decontaminated or been out of the water for 30 days. So they actually have to have a slip of paper that says, you know, they went through the decontamination process. And then out west, what we use is a zip tie, a boat seal that goes through the safety chain on a boat through the eye of the boat. So if you're going to launch a boat, you actually have to break that seal. So if that seal's been on there for 30 days, it means they haven't launched the boat in 30 days. And so they'd be okay to launch. But having that step where the onus is on the boat owner makes it easier for watercraft inspectors and it provides that solid documentation that the action was taken. So it was, one of the surprising things with this bill is that there weren't problems with it. So, you all of a sudden had to have 4,000 wakeboard boats coming to Montana over the summer be decontaminated. It was implemented really well, and all the boaters that I talked to said that the decontamination process went quickly. It takes from 15 minutes to 30 minutes to decontaminate ballast tanks. So it was implemented well, and it didn't really cause that much of a problem at the watercraft inspection stations. The other thing about it, it allowed the state or local businesses to charge a fee for decontamination. The state decided not to charge a fee, but it would have at least allowed to reimburse the state for that extra effort. So now I'm going to switch gears a bit, talk about something that I'm also really like and am excited about, and that's environmental DNA. My introduction to environmental DNA was because we don't have mussels out west. We have this huge constituency that wants to know that their lakes don't have mussels. And so you go out there and sample, and people go, okay, great. What does that tell us? Does that tell us that we don't have mussels? So that confidence of knowing whether or not you have mussels is hard to get with traditional sampling. It really hasn't been quantified. And with DNA, since it's coming from a lab research standpoint, they are coming from that perspective of trying to understand the confidence of using eDNA to probability of detect. And also with the zebra mussels, because they're episodic spawners, very early on in an infestation, they're only going to be spawning in a very short window of time, a 3-week window. So you actually have to be out there in that 3 weeks in the right location of the lake to capture a veliger. And so that is what the traditional plankton sampling uses to detect zebra or quagga mussels. Well, DNA is present all the time. And so potentially it lengthens the window of when you can actually go out and sample and potentially give you a better ability to detect species. So it's a collection of sediment, water, and even air samples, and then analyzing the DNA that's in that sample that's unique to species. It is a highly sensitive, rapidly developing technique and technology that is being used in a wide range of species. And it's pretty incredible what they can detect. Wide range of applications, from detection of rare and invasive species to biodiversity estimates. You go out there, you collect that one sample, and you analyze it for a multitude of species. And all organisms shed DNA. The great thing for aquatics is water mixes. So it mixes the DNA. So if you collect a water sample, it's more likely that you're going to get DNA in there. And also it degrades rather quickly, which is important as it increases the probability that the species currently exists there. You don't want to be collecting DNA and it's a species that was there 5 years ago, or it was a species that was introduced but then failed to establish. And so it's a transition DNA. So that quickness of the degradation is nice to document that you do have species that are actually existing currently in that water body. How is it used? It's used to measure biodiversity, early detection of aquatic invasive species, documentation of species eradication efforts. So after they've gone in and done an eradication effort, then they may do a visual survey, can't find anything, then go out with DNA testing to see if they can detect the DNA of the species. So there's this one out west, bullfrogs aren't native. So they did a bullfrog eradication. They found DNA, but when they went out there for visual surveys, they couldn't find it, and took 4 years of visual surveys to find the bullfrogs that were consistently detected with the eDNA analysis. Really, it's great, another tool. I mean, it's not going to replace traditional sampling. It's another tool that we can use for AIS monitoring and detection. Some examples of how people have used it: environmental DNA metabarcoding of wildflowers to reveal the diverse community of terrestrial arthropods. So, things that land on flowers actually deposit their DNA, and so you can actually test them to see what insects are using flowers. They've used sedimentary eDNA to provide information on timescale and fish species composition compared to what's in the water, right? As sediment is deposited on lake bottoms, it'll contain that DNA from previous years, and you're actually able to go into that sediment and see, hey, 100 years ago, what sort of fish species composition do we have in this lake versus now? Detection of native and invasive crayfish species. Again, they were able to use year-round monitoring, and then large-scale screening of river systems. They've done a lot of comparison of looking at how does eDNA compare to our traditional methodologies for detecting species. And in stream systems, the environmental DNA consistently outperformed established methods for detection of quagga mussels in flowing water. So rapidly evolving technique that has a lot of potential. How is it done? One of the great things about eDNA, especially in a aquatic system, it's simply a grab sample. You're going out, you're collecting 2 liters of water approximately. You run it through a filter system, a filter. That filter is then set to a lab for analysis, and that's where the hard work is done. There's a whole series of extractions that they have to do to get to that DNA. But in terms of the field work, it's fairly simple, just grabbing water and filtering water. So some of the benefits, one of the things that, again, really drew me to it, it's a statistically rigorous analysis of detection probabilities. They're really approaching it from that and going and doing the research to say, here's a rare species. What is our probability of going out and doing DNA sampling and being able to detect it? Because that's what they want to be able to do. And so refining techniques to get at that. You can sample analysis for multiple species. That one sample could be analyzed for 100 different species, which is pretty incredible. No requirement for taxonomical expertise in the field. As good as we all think we are, we're not perfect. We misidentify species. And oftentimes we're sending out technicians into the field that don't have significant training. And so this is one of the ways to overcome that lack of taxonomical expertise. A simple and easy field collection, avoidance of potential harm of handling of protected and sensitive species, and habitat disturbance. Again, collecting the water, you're not having to trap species, like especially amphibians. They rely a lot on trapping. This allows you to collect the water instead of trapping. Samples can be archived for future analysis. Once you've collected a sample, oftentimes the labs will keep it. So one of the things you might think about, like starry stonewort shows up, or a new invasive species, you actually have samples in a lab from 100 different lakes that you could then analyze to see, it showed up in this one lake. Do we have it in these other lakes? That's a huge benefit. Rapid analysis of multiple samples. You can run 100 samples, 1,000 samples at the same time. So there can be a very quick turnaround time of multiple samples. And relatively inexpensive. It's around $50 to run a eDNA sample, so relatively inexpensive. There are some concerns with eDNA use. it's new, so we're not used to it. Just because you detect the DNA does not provide 100% certainty that a species is there and established. Again, that failed introduction, you may be dealing with an invasive species that was introduced. It's there for that one summer, but it doesn't establish. And so you may detect it, but it isn't there. It is extremely sensitive. And so there are some issues with potential lab contamination. So it doesn't give you that 100% certainty. We are much more comfortable having an organism in hand and being like, yes, we have it. With DNA, you don't have that. You have a lab test. And so that makes a lot of us that are used to having that animal in hand not as comfortable. False positives, because the analysis is very sensitive. A lot of concerns about how you use the test results. Does it mean that you do have an invasive species in a lake, and then what are you going to do? So there have been a lot of people that have used it much more as a screening test. Like, we found it in the DNA, now we need to go out and look further to see if the species is actually there. The science is rapidly evolving, so a lot of our opinions about eDNA use may be from 5 years ago. So that as it's rapidly evolving, it's addressing a lot of these issues that people have, but also the techniques are changing. So it's much easier to deal with something that's established and uniform than something that is constantly changing on you. Some of the constraints, DNA markers don't exist for all species. So that is something that they're working on, but if you have a new species that you want to have a sample analyzed for, you have to pay to develop that marker. So that can be an additional cost. With lakes, one of the problems is with lakes, the stratification in the summer can limit the mixing of DNA. So you have something that lives on the bottom of the lake. Unless you sample the water near that bottom of the lake, you may not get that DNA. Fall turnover after that, when you've had that mixing, that has been a time when DNA analysis on lakes has had a higher probability of detection, has been a more accurate measure of what species are in the lake. Streams, it works great, right? You have that mixing. However, if you're going to one spot in a stream to say, here's what's in this stream, it potentially may not detect something that is 3 or 5 miles upstream. So there's a limit to how far DNA travels, remains intact enough to sample. But again, those constraints are rapidly being overcome and addressed. You know, there's so much research going on this that people are looking at all these issues and looking at ways to overcome them. You know, with lakes, one of the things, instead of using that 2-liter grab sample, people are looking at, can you use a plankton net? Can you sample the entire water column, use a larger filter, and be able to sample a larger volume of water to overcome that stratification of the DNA in a lake. Some upcoming developments, in situ continuous monitoring. So you can actually have DNA collection that is going continuously, could sample twice a week, once a month, or when environmental conditions suggest that a species would be occurring or in higher abundance. So this is a underwater ROV that they use in the ocean. That is a continuous eDNA monitor. So there's a lot of new developments like that. Metabarcoding is one where you can set in one sample and have it analyzed for 50 different species at the same time. It's the DNA analysis is less sensitive, but that is something that they're looking at. So you could have 30 different invasive species that you want to check for your lake. You send it in for that one metabarcoding analysis. Real-time analysis. So you actually could have a device, you go out to a lake and sample and get a result in real time. And they're looking at going from species detection to can we use based on DNA abundance, look at population abundance. So fish managers have a real interest in this because it's much easier to go out and do collecting water samples than electrofishing and trying to assess abundance that way. Some potential uses that I see, early detection of aquatic invasive species. Another tool that we can use beyond the traditional surveys, that collection of a water sample, analysis of that water sample for aquatic invasive species, documentation of rare and sensitive species. You can measure the restoration of native species in the habitat. So you restore this habitat, are the native species coming back? One of the, it's an easier way to measure if those native species are now occurring in those habitat. And citizen science. This is something that I would really like to see if I can move forward. Because those samples are easily collected, they can be filtered at a central location. So you could have a weekend event where you have people go and collect that 1 gallon water sample, bring it into the office, and you filter it. And it'd be very easy for people to get some information on the lake. So, in a one weekend, you could get data on 50 different lakes. And so this is just one example where they did this in England, where they wanted to look for this in threatened newt species. They sent out volunteers to collect samples on some sites that they knew had newts. They collected samples, and 219 out of 239 sites, over 90%, were correctly identified as supporting newts. So like a great way to get some good data that is well verifiable and good data from citizen science. So that's all I have. So this is my contact information. Definitely, I'm looking forward to working with you all on more AIS issues. And if you want any more information on what's going on out west or on eDNA, get in touch.
I have a question.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks, Erik.
Well, okay, I actually have two.
I think
One of them
what we
is
should
like,
wait. Maybe what we should do is save all of the questions for the end. Maybe we'll take like
okay.
2 or 3, or let's take like 1 or 2. But I think to give Heidi a fair amount of time, and then
no,
afterwards we'll have a question and answer session just to make sure we're kind of flowing.
No.
And give Heidi enough time. Sorry, Caroline, I did not mean to interrupt you there.
That's okay.
But yeah, if that's cool, Erik, and then if you could stop sharing. That was awesome, though. That was, man, I'm excited that you're here in Wisconsin, in Southeast Wisconsin. I know I want to pick your brain way more on all of this. So I wrote down like 4 or 5 questions. If you guys had questions, please make sure you write them down, because afterwards we'll have Erik and Heidi both able to answer some questions. So with that being said, we can go and go right to Heidi. And Heidi, if you want to share, oh, by the way, if you guys were wondering how much 80 gallons of water weighs, it was about 700 pounds. So if somebody's hauling 80 pounds of water around in their trailer or in their wake boat, they're hauling around a Harley Davidson motorcycle pretty much. So, all right, so now we're going to talk with Heidi Bunk. She is the lake biologist for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. So here are her topics. She does aquatic invasive species grants, aquatic plant monitoring, aquatic plants with citizen monitoring, aquatic plant management, blue-green algae. The list goes on. Heidi's a jack of all trades. She is someone who I've had the pleasure of working with for a number of years. And Heidi, if you want to come off mute to make sure we can hear you.
I am here.
Perfect. And then I can stop sharing and you can go ahead and share if you'd like to do it that way.
I'm looking for the button here. There we go. All right. And
all right.
Let's see here. Perhaps a slideshow. Yeah, it looks like I need to switch, don't I?
That always happens.
Display settings. How's that?
Perfect. Cool, looks good.
Okay. So I wasn't really sure what to anticipate in terms of audience members, and I wasn't sure what to anticipate in terms of time. So this presentation is a little bit too long for the space. So I am going to gloss over a few of the slides. And I'm also going to gloss over a few of the slides because I have a pretty experienced audience here that knows a lot of this stuff already. So to start off with, this particular presentation is a compilation of a number of presentations I've done over the years. Some of the content in it is stuff that Arthur Watkinson put together for me, as well as some stuff that Craig Helker and I collaborated on. So for those of you who have heard me speak before, and many of you have, some of this content will be very familiar. So this is a good slide because it really describes my job. We have some people that want X and some people that want Y, and they can't understand why I would listen to Y if they're X, and so on and so forth. So I enjoyed this slide. All right, so as many of you know, I'm very concerned about aquatic plants because they have a lot of benefits for your area lake, certainly in terms of sediment stabilization, shoreline erosion. And here is an example of a lake or a pond that's gone kind of bad, a little rogue. We don't like that condition. And so in the regulations that I work with, NR 107, which is chemical treatment, and NR 109, which is harvesting, it's a big balancing act. So not only with the ecology of the lake, but also with the interest of the user groups. Some folks are very pro-chemical. Some people are very pro-harvest. The Department of Natural Resources is neutral and simply implements the codes based on the criteria listed in those codes. So some of the things that we look at when we're making decisions, we want to look at fish habitat. Some people might not realize that the aquatic plants provide a great place for fish to spread their eggs. There's also zooplankton. They are microscopic animals that the fish fry, so the very young fish would feed upon, as well as those forage fish like your shiners and darters. The aquatic plant beds also provide ambush areas for the predatory fish. Brad, are you grimacing at that fish eating another fish? It looks like you were grimacing
I
there.
was wondering I was wondering if a fish was eating a fish in that picture.
It was. Okay, and so on the left there is an example of zooplankton. So that is a microscopic shot. And then on the right, on the bottom, you have your dragonfly. The upper right is a crayfish, although I will tell you it is a stock photo and not a Wisconsin crayfish. So don't get too excited there. So these aquatic plant beds provide a lot of life stage requirements for all the different animals living in your lake or along your stream. And something that many people might not know, if you look at the bottom right there, the sago pondweed, the nutlets actually provide great food source for your dabbling and wading ducks. So I call it the cashew of the duck world. All right, so some of the regulatory tools that I am working with: chemical treatment, hand removal, and mechanical. And many lakes use multiple tools. Golden Lake is one example that has really embraced using all the tools at hand. Many of you are familiar with NR 107 permits. Those are chemical treatments. And they're required for all water bodies of the state. They require a certified applicator, somebody who's been certified by the Department of Agricultural Trade and Consumer Protection. If they're a commercial applicator, they also have to have a license. I do get asked a lot about, what about buying a bag at Menards and just using it? If you're spreading just granular and it's less than 1/4 of an acre, it can be done by an individual who is not certified, but you still need a permit. New to about maybe 8-10 years ago, we started also getting involved in wastewater treatment permits, WPDES permits. And so those permits are needed for discharge as well. All right, so areas that you might need a permit that you might not think about. Certainly lakes and streams and public and private ponds, but what about wetlands, drainage ditches? You might need them for mosquito larvicides and even golf course ponds, and right-of-ways with standing water. So those are some of the places that a permit could be needed that you might not think about off the top of your head. Permit fees, compared to some in the Chapter 30 program, are actually coming up fairly reasonable. So the non-refundable fee is $20, and then there's an acreage fee. The maximum fee per lake is $12.70. So a lot of people may not realize that there's a pretty good size out there of individuals that have pretty large concerns about the use of chemicals in area lakes, and I hear from them. And they ask me a lot of good questions about the research out there, and most of them are very good to talk to. There's always a few that get a little bit too passionate and aren't ready to hear the regulatory end of things. One interesting hangover from the chemical treatment program is that there's still a little bit of rhetoric out there that 2,4-D, which is a commonly used chemical, is Agent Orange, which is simply not true. Agent Orange was a collection of a number of chemicals, and 2,4-D happened to be in that list. Permits are conditioned, and one of the conditions that's actually spelled out in the code is those yellow signs, those 11-inch by 11-inch signs. And when those signs get posted, I do get a lot of calls sometimes. Applicators tend to not want to treat on Fridays so that they don't get calls on Saturdays and Sundays. So they typically want to treat Monday through Thursday because on a lake that maybe it's a little controversial to treat, you might get a lot of calls on the weekend. And I also put in here a link. The department has fact sheets about the active ingredients in many of the chemicals. So chemicals like 2,4-D have many trade names. It could be Weedar, it could be Navigate, or it could be Sculpin, for instance. So we look at the fact sheets and have the active ingredient, and you can look at that and learn more about what we do know about the impact of those chemicals. Another question I'm asked a lot is, how does the EPA fit in? How does DADCAP fit in? And where's DNR's role? So I thought I'd share a few slides on that. So when a new chemical is introduced on the market, EPA research reviews the research that's out there, and they look at non-target organism impacts, and they make decisions for what represents a reasonable risk for use, which is different from no risk. It's a reasonable risk. And so a lot of people don't realize that at first, that's what EPA is doing. The EPA then delegates some responsibilities for implementation to the various states. So in the case of Wisconsin, you have Wisconsin Department of Agricultural Trade and Consumer Protection. So let's talk about DADCAP. What do they specifically do? They actually worry about the labels, and they have a nice database called the Kelly database that you can look up all sorts of information on a specific chemical, trade name, active ingredient, the target pest, other organisms that are controlled by that herbicide, concentration rates. So if you're interested in learning about a particular product, you can type in your browser. Let's, for example, you wanted to look at Sculpin. You'd go to Google and type in Sculpin chemical label, and then you'd be able to find that industry label and look at it. So now let's talk about DNR. Where is our regulatory authority? Well, we have NR 107, which is aquatic plant management, chemical treatment. And that authority was provided in state statute by our legislature. We have criteria by which to evaluate applications. And something that's a little bit shall we say, more unique to permitting in Wisconsin DNR land. If you're getting, let's say, a riprap permit, you apply for the permit, it's reviewed. If they agree, then they issue it, and you're done. You get to go ahead and implement. In the case of an NR 107 permit, applicators submit a permit application for all the acreage they might want to treat. Then they tell us closer to the date of treatment what they actually think they want to treat, and then I evaluate that. So it's a little bit different than, let's say, a riprap permit. And I have to look at a lot of different factors when making my decisions, both in the issuance of the permit and in the treatment supervisions. Big things I look at are impact to the animals that would be utilizing the area, and the impact to plants that are native that we don't want to target with the chemical, but could be impacted by the chemical. All right, many of you are familiar with hand harvesting. Nate over at Silver Lake certainly has been doing a lot of that over the years, along with Jessica. And in terms of a different regulation, NR 109, which regulates harvesting, that's the mechanical aspect, the hand removal, the dash. So in terms of hand removal, in most cases, a customer or a citizen can hand remove, hand cut, hand rake 30 feet along the shoreline out into the lake without a NR 109 permit. There is an exception if you are located in a DNR sensitive area, then you'll need a permit. You do have to remove the vegetation from the water. You can't just let it dangle there in the water and float away. You need to take it away. Many of you are familiar with the large-scale mechanical harvesting. Many of you on this call have worked with me on the multiple-year permits for large-scale harvesting. You need to have a lake management plan. It needs to be updated every 5 years. There's also contract harvesting available. There were 2 vendors on the market, and now there's a 3rd one. So if you need to know about that, let me know separately. Disposal sites have to be approved by our department. We have to make sure that you're not placing the plants in a wetland or a floodplain. There are different sizes of harvesters, and I believe this is one that is very similar to what North Lake has. They have a smaller harvester. There's dash harvesting as well, diver assisted suction harvest. Time check. Just want to make sure that I leave enough time here. Okay, I'm going to try to talk for about 10 more minutes so that we have a half hour for questions.
Okay, that's perfect.
Okay. So NR 109 permits, dash. So a diver is in the water, or a couple divers, they're hand pulling the aquatic plants, and then they feed them into a suction hose. And then on the lower right, you can see that it's being discharged into a pontoon, into a series of baskets so that the plants can be collected. This does allow for some selective harvest so that you can leave some of the desirable plants in while taking out your target organism. And this works better in sandy lakes than in, shall we say, silty lakes. Silty lakes, it's harder to see after you start pulling. All right, I think I'm going to skip over this section just for the interest of time. So I want to talk a little bit about sensitive areas and some language out there that gets a little confusing. So under NR 107, we have sensitive areas. And here's a couple examples of what a sensitive area might look like. It's going to have a pretty good component of shoreline vegetation. It's going to have some floating vegetation, maybe some emergent vegetation. So on the left side, there's some water shield floating. There's some arrowhead and pickerel weeds sticking out of the water. On the right side, you see some water lilies floating. In this particular slide, I took right out of NR 107 the definition of a sensitive area. The areas of aquatic vegetation offering critical life stage requirements for those animals using the water body. I'm paraphrasing clearly. And that is something I really need to look at a lot when I'm looking at harvesting permits, chemical treatment permits, and supervisions. So terms can be confusing. The sensitive area definition was developed a long time ago. Our code is undergoing some revision as we speak. There is the term ESNARI, Area of Special Natural Resource Interest, and that includes a whole lot of things, and sensitive areas are one of the things. There's also critical habitat, and that's been expanded to beyond lakes. And so I put in a couple of links here, and Brad will be sharing this later. So if you wanted to learn more about it, you can certainly peruse those pages. And I did do a quick snapshot of the areas of special natural resources interest. And at the very bottom, you can see in that bullet point, it says that sensitive areas are one of these types of ESNARIs. And an ESNARI designation kicks in a lot of additional review in chapter 30, if you're looking at riprap or dredging or something like that. So these are newer terms compared to the sensitive area term, and sometimes people are wondering what they all mean. All right, so here I have a series of questions that I've been asked a lot. And so I thought I'd do a little Q&A here. I live on a private lake. Do I need a permit to chemically treat or harvest? So the first issue is that a private lake is a misnomer, because just because you don't have public access does not necessarily make it a private lake in the eyes of the regulation. Your lake is a water body of the state. It's going to be subject to the regulations under NR 107, NR 109. May I cut water lilies or rake up water lilies? I get asked this a lot because a lot of people think that water lilies are very protected by state law, and that if you even take one out, you might have a warden come visit you. So water lilies can be removed, again, 30 feet along your frontage up into about 100 feet from shore. If you do have frontage that's next to a sensitive area or is part of a ESNARI, then you would need a permit from me. Do you need a permit to chemically treat a private pond? Yes. What is a private pond? Well, that means it's entirely located on the land of one person. No surface water discharge or a discharge that can be controlled, and it doesn't have access to the public. So we do have private pond permitting, and then we have non-private pond and public and lake permitting. Also stream permitting. So I'll just call it private pond and non-private. We are done with paper forms. It's time for the new world. Paper forms are gone, and now we are doing everything electronically. So the link to that is at the bottom of this slide. All right, I covered this a little bit before, but can I treat using chemicals myself, or must I hire a contractor? If you're using granular and doing less than a 1/4 acre, you still need a permit, but you can do it yourself. Do I need a permit to chemically treat a wetland? Yes, most likely you will. And you'd consult with me on your specific situation. Cattails, favorite question. Lots of people have been asking me about cattails. It's been a little dry lately, maybe, and the cattails are pretty happy. And so they're blocking some access. So again, you can hand cut 30 feet along your frontage out into the lake up to about 100 feet from shore. I can assure you most people will not make it to 100 feet. They'll get tired at about 40 feet, 50 feet tops. You must remove the cut material from the water, dispose of it in an upland area. You can't be removing the root area. Then you'd have to be getting a dredging permit. Can I mow the cattails in my wetland property? If it's above the ordinary high water mark of a stream, yes. Otherwise, you would likely need a permit, but again, you'd consult with me about your specific situation. The cut material either has to be removed from the stream banks and placed in an upland, or spread in a very thin layer in a wetland away from the stream bank. So we basically don't want the cut material ending up back in the stream. This especially becomes important if there's a dam on the stream. It would make the owner of the dam very upset with you if you allowed a big pile of cattails to get down there. All right, I think I'll skip that top question. this is an interesting question. What if I'm a lake district or lake association wanting to do a whole lake, spot pull? Since you are not the riparian, you do need to get a permit. So Nate actually dutifully gets a permit every year to do his hand pulling of Eurasian water milfoil in spot areas of Silver Lake. All right, I think we'll skip the burning. Muck eating pellets, one of my favorites. So do I need a permit for them? Well, it depends on the purpose. If you're looking to control aquatic plants, then yes. If you're looking to control sediment, you need to consult with our wastewater staff. Another favorite question, can I dye my pond just to annoy my neighbor, some team that he really hates? Maybe the Vikings, maybe the Bears. If you're looking to control algae, then guess you need a permit from myself or someone in the NR 109 program. If it's aesthetic, simply because you want to make your neighbor mad, then no. What about dumping dye into a public water body? That's more complex. You have to notify our department well ahead of time. You most likely are going to need a wastewater permit. Typically, a municipality is going to make this request. And no exception if the Packers actually win the Super Bowl. We can't, speed up the review process. All right, so then a little bit on where to find online permitting information. And again, that'll be in the PowerPoint presentation that Brad can share later. And I whipped through a whole lot of content in the interest of time, and I met my goal of 7:30, Brad.
Nice work, Heidi. That was awesome. Really interesting stuff. And I know people on the lakes probably have a lot of questions. So both for Erik and Heidi, I will open up questions now, and maybe we just do like a discussion. So if you want to stop sharing, once again, I will share this recording. So this meeting is being recorded, and I'll share this on the Lake Country Clean Waters website. There's a lot of density of information here, so happy to share that. You can go through at your own pace. And then with Heidi and Erik's permission, I'll share their separate PowerPoints as well. But yeah, I'd like to open it up for anyone with questions. And Caroline, I know you've been patiently waiting. Thank you. We can start with your questions for Erik, and then we can move on to questions for both Erik and Heidi at any in any order.
Okay, Erik. One is, we were talking about the wake boats, and it was really interesting to hear how the water still, 80 gallons or whatever water can still be in that boat when they pull it out. Is there ever been any discussion with the designers of these boats to make pumps that pump that water out first before they can remove it? That's one question.
Yes, so there have been some updates with the design of boaters, and so some of the newer designs are gravity fed, where they don't use a pump system. They can actually back a wave into the boat and it just fills, and so there's gates on the back that just automatically open. There also is a company that designs a filter system that will filter out any organisms. So they are working with the manufacturers on it.
Then the other one, you said you just sort of arrived here with your new job. And when you were telling us about the things that are going on out west, as far as working with the public as they use these sites and things like that. Just briefly, what are some of the similarities here in Wisconsin, compared to what you've just left?
I think one of the similarities is the vast majority of water users want to do the right thing. A lot of boaters that clean their boats in both locations. So that is a similarity. And then there's the subset of people that don't want to, that we still need to convince to clean their boats.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Good questions, Caroline. I was amazed at some of the stuff the compliance that you seem to get out west. It just seems so awesome. I mean, implementing the Clean Boats, Clean Waters program in Wisconsin, you know, it's all voluntary. I mean, Nate, Ed, other people on the call, Jim and Jerry, I think you guys, and John, I think you guys all hire, you get grants from the DNR to get Clean Boats, Clean Waters people to come in and be at the boat launch for as many hours as basically you can. It's like at least 120, I think, or maybe 200 hours for the summer. It's not required. And in fact, it's you have to do work to get in and do that, which, I mean, we have people who spend time and effort and lots of time scheduling these Clean Boats, Clean Waters people and doing all this work. So Erik, it'd be cool for you to connect with some of these people like Nate or Jim to talk about the Clean Boats, Clean Waters people who do work on the launches. And I know you have interns this summer who will be doing that as well. It's I'll be excited to hear at the end of the summer what some of those similarities and differences are as well.
I've got a question. Does Erik have any suggestions for, or has he up to this point thought of any new ideas to throw out to those that are doing the inspection?
You know, so one of the strengths about Clean Boats, Clean Water is about changing behavior. So I think it's really good about that one-on-one interactions with boaters. But so that sort of recognition of boat types, recognition of when a boat has a live well or not, and then being able to talk to that boater about their live well. You know, I could see that being, and then also addressing the wakeboard boats. Some sort of like asking wakeboard boaters to pump out their systems. Those would be like two of the initial things that could be incorporated.
Cool. Nate had a question for Heidi. If someone owns 150 feet of lake frontage, can they pick a different 30 feet each year to harvest aquatic plants, or do they need to essentially declare a strip up to 30 feet and continue to remove aquatics in the same corridor year after year?
The current code is silent on that matter.
Nice.
That's easy.
Short and sweet answer.
So, you know, if they want to pick a different 30 feet each year, they can. As I have mentioned, the code is under revision right now.
I've got a question for Heidi. Have we identified the spinewort or stonewort in other lakes over the past year?
Have there been more
Have there been
lakes
more lakes?
documented?
Yes, correct.
Around here in 220, no. Up in more of central Wisconsin, yes. 2 more lakes, I believe, in that area.
Do you know what lakes? Just curious.
I'm sorry, I don't remember.
That's okay. I'm just wondering. Oh, Erik, I have a question about wake boats again. I know, I think a big deal down here, and we keep hearing about it, is wakeboard boats, whether it be shoreline erosion, aquatic invasive species. It seems to just be a very hot topic. And thinking about those bilges, is there like a pump you could buy, or like a pump you could have at a cleaning station that would just take some of that water and pump it right out of there?
Not necessarily at a cleaning station. What we normally do is flush. So those tanks are designed to be to have antifreeze in the winter, to be winterized. So they're meant to have antifreeze put into them. So it's very easy to have an attachment that would allow you to flush hose water through it, turn on the pumps, and you could just circulate through and flush it out that way.
Nice. Cool.
So then that brings up the question, do a lot of the sites, the boat ramps, do they have the way of actually taking water with a hose and everything at those ramps? Or in some of them, or here in Wisconsin, or to do something like that, because that sounds like a good idea.
Based on my experience, no, it's going to be something more specialized. It'd be more, could you provide a tool to wakeboard owners that then they could use at home?
Mhm.
So are you saying that the antifreeze itself would not sterilize the tank during the winter?
It would. It is more the summertime use when they move from lake to lake. So, that wakeboard owner flushes their or turns on their pumps, drains it as much as possible. What about that 20 gallons? And could we provide something to them that would allow them to flush that 20 gallons out?
We used to teach about a bleach solution that we knew would kill many AIS. It's probably hard to know how much water you would have in your ballast exactly to know what to measure when it came to like a bleach solution, to tell people, hey, if you dump 4 tablespoons of bleach in your 20 gallons that are left in your ballast. But it's probably hard to know exactly that with the way these boats are, right?
Correct. And then there's also issues of then that bleach is going to then be discharged into a water body.
True.
So what it's, they had to address this with ocean going vessels. And so the way they address it regulatory is they mandate that they flush it as they move across the ocean. And that they measured the effectiveness of that, and it's 90% effective, that flushing system. So that is probably the easiest way to deal with that residual water.
Is that all ocean going vessels, or is that just going freshwater to saltwater? Just getting into the weeds, pun intended.
Currently for the United States, it's all ocean going vessels have to go through an open ocean exchange.
Okay. Cool. The idea to have an app that measures boats and keeps track of invasive species that have been on boats is amazing. And when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, how are we not doing that already? And I just thought that was really cool. So it's awesome. I think that's really awesome that you were implementing that out west, and would love to see something like that in our area, because I think that would be really cool to know, and just to have a little bit more regulation and put a little bit, like you said, Eric, put a little more onus on the boat owner themselves to say, hey, look, I know it's been on my boat. Look, here's what I did to get it off. So does anybody else have any questions?
Heidi, could you talk a little bit about the process if you're at a boat landing or on your shoreline and you discover a new invasive like starry stonewort or what you believe is a quagga mussel or something that you might not expect to see? Like if that, say there's 4 or 5 plants, can Joe Lake resident or concerned citizen pull those weeds, or would you want someone to call you first and say, hey, we need to identify this first in a formal way before we take eradication action?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a judgment call, really. If Dee or you, found something, I certainly know that you guys know what you're doing. If it's somebody who hasn't worked with me, I would prefer, if it's a plant specimen, take one specimen and get it verified, and then we can go from there. One thing I've run into a lot is I've had a lot of fishermen bring me mud puppies that they thought were gobies. And I don't want people killing a big pile of animals thinking it's an invasive when it's not. So, if Dee called me up and said, hey, Heidi, I got a big pile of starry stonewort in a different part of the lake. You okay if I yank it? Yeah, go ahead, Dee. I know what you know what it looks like. But if I, haven't worked with you, then I'd want that specimen brought in. Does that help, Nate?
Yes, thank you. And let's say you're at a boat launch like up in Mobbin and you see 2 or 3 starry stonewort plants growing next to the pier. Is that,
Mhm.
did you just let that be, or do you, and wait for the next round of?
If you want to
removal, or-
hand pull it, or Ed wants to hand pull it, or Jim wants to hand pull it, that's fine. You guys know what you're looking at. But I've had so many things brought to me that people thought were starry stonewort and they were not. So it's, again, the experience of the individual. So if you're not experienced, bring me one specimen. If you are, give me a call, let me know what you're doing, and have at.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you're looking to do a very large, hand pull, then yeah, let's talk. But if we're talking about 5-6 strands of something, go ahead. If it's animals, if it's a quagga mussel, I'd like to see it, because as far as I know, we don't have any inland quagga mussels around here. For a while, I was monitoring on Big Cedar and Delavan to see if we could get quagga mussels attached to our devices, and luckily, we kept finding zebra mussels, so that's encouraging.
Daryl asks, if lakes are connected to each other via the Oconomowoc River, for example, is it only a matter of time until an upper lake spreads invasive species to a lower lake? Is canoeing, and then the second question, is canoeing from one lake to a lower lake a problem if there's no ballast water?
So
via
canoeing on the chains, is a pretty low risk item. What was the first question? I'm sorry.
I think it's asking if an invasive species will spread from like one lake to another lake via something like the Oconomowoc River or Bark River.
Okay, yeah.
Is it only a matter of time?
I think it depends on where it's growing. If it's in a isolated bay, you have a chance of containing it. If it's in the main thoroughfare, then you need to be on top of it. And certainly Lower and Upper Nabobbin have been very conscientious about the population in the river there. So, and doing their best to keep it from leaving that location. So if it's in a embayment, you have a much better chance. Nate, you've got a couple little embayments that if you got something in, you'd have a good chance of dealing with it. D, you've got some. So it just depends on where it's growing.
Heidi, could I ask a question? This is Ed Cohen.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked before about
Yes, we have.
starry stonewort, at the landing between the lakes and how it's moved into the area south of the interstate.
Yes.
And the hypothesis that some of the areas where it's spread into Lower Nabobbin, south the interstate, are furrows that have been carved by boats planing as they come under the interstate. Has there been any thought, or is it possible to have any kind of signage, buoys, anything like that to guide people through a certain corridor between the two, from one lake to the next, or a slow no wake rule through that area, so we don't continue to provide virgin areas, virgin furrows for starry stonewort to spread?
So that's quite a few questions rolled into one.
Correct. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's start with, how do you get permission to do all those things? Okay. So if you want to place an informational buoy, that's a fairly simple process of working with the conservation warden, applying for a permit. They will look at it from the standpoint of, will it impede navigation? They'll likely consult me. Is there a good biological reason for this request? And so that can be a relatively simple process. Now, on the other hand, if you want to change where the slow no wake is, then you're talking about local ordinances and getting that passed on the local level. There is standard ordinance language available in a booklet provided by the wardens, and I can send that to you. So if you just want to send me an email tomorrow, Ed, just remind me. I can send that to you. It's guidance for placement of waterway markers and development of local ordinances.
Probably actually the best person to send that to would be Jim, the president of the association, so it can spread easier to other people.
All right, so Jim, if I don't remember, shoot me an email. Okay.
I have another question. You mentioned Golden Lake in your talk, Heidi.
Yes.
And I've been looking at that lake, and it says that they have this like control of invasive weed species, boat and trailer inspection, aquatic plant study, annual water chemistry monitoring, and so forth. And you were saying that they seem to be quite a lake for working on this. Does their like lake association play a tremendous role in organizing these particular types of things that they do with their lake? Who actually organizes things like that?
There is the Golden Lake Association. They have taken a very active role in the management of curly leaf pondweed and Eurasian water milfoil, especially in their sensitive area on the northern end of the lake. They have applied for grants over the last few years for both dash harvest and hand removal with divers. Now, COVID-19, of course, put some dents in their plans with the hand diving last year and this year. They also chemically treat a small area of the more developed shoreline that is not grant funded, but they use all the different methods available to them. There are active volunteers on the lake that do the citizen lake monitoring. So that wasn't so much the Golden Lake Association, but rather individual citizens that decided to participate in the citizen lake monitoring program.
I'm asked the question because the Lake Country Clean Waters, brings in like speakers so that people can understand and then see what's like things are like at their lake compared to other lakes, or talk about those issues. And I thought Golden Lake might be a good one if a lot of the work was done by that association to get that going. It might be interesting to other lakes that have to start that kind of work.
Yeah,
it was a thought.
You got two speakers on this call. That would be perfect as well.
Okay, good.
Right, Dee and Nate, I hate to put you on the spot, but you both would be perfect.
Oh, good.
Yeah, Dee has done a ton of work with starry stonewort.
Okay.
And Nate with the and then Nate with the Eurasian water milfoil.
Good.
And
good.
Golden probably, they do have Eurasian water milfoil, but it's interesting from year to year it cycles. So this happens to be the year of curly, and the Eurasian's not very expressive this year. In terms of native plants, this is the year of Eladia. So it's interesting how the plants cycle. So, and then I should actually mention a third speaker right here, which would be Jim. He's done a lot with starry stonewort, and then Jennifer's been involved. So you've got a lot of pretty active people on this very call. And then I can't forget about Jerry Hine, who has done a ton of work with Mason Creek. So kudos to everybody that, really, is contributing and making a difference. Really, you've got a wealth of activism on this call, Caroline.
That's good.
Agreed.
Heidi, I think you just alluded to this question a minute ago, but did I hear you say that the Eurasian milfoil this year is in general not showing up as vigorously as it has in the past?
As a very broad brush stroke, yes. It's way down in moose, way down in pine. I haven't been on Okachi. I'll be on there next week actually, so I'll check out Okachi's population. It's been a year of curly this year as a general rule. People are complaining about curly. They're not complaining about milfoil. I'm
Heidi,
sure there's some exceptions, but
Heidi, this is Jim Keller. We've also noticed a decline in Eurasian water milfoil on Lower Nemaman.
Yeah, I think Brian went out there and said, "Yeah, Heidi, I got nothing to do."
Yeah.
Never mind. And Moose Lake, I went out there and I let him know. I saw a couple patches, and he went out, found those two patches, and said, "Yeah, that's about it. Can I treat those two patches? Yeah, go ahead."
So how do you throw that into your equation of whether we're making progress with our treatment or not?
Yeah, you measure the progress by doing periodic plant surveys. There's going to be changes from year to year, but the things I look for in the long-term plant surveys is whether or not the native plants are still holding up in terms of the number of native plants and in terms of their relative densities over time. There's going to be cycles, and I think the 5-year surveys really help cancel out a lot of that variability and that cycling.
This is Jennifer. How does the snow cover, does that have to do with it as well on the ice in the winter?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that we're finding that there's less Eurasian milfoil. We were going to treat an area and I still don't know if they found it or not. We have yet to talk to the consultant.
Yeah, I'm having a good echo on your microphone there.
Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, if I remember correctly, your consultant also came back to me and said, yeah, not yet, Heidi. So there just hasn't been quite the response. But to kind of fully answer your question about ice, Jennifer, thickness of ice matters too. So a good example was the winter of 2013, 2014. Many lakes were reporting to me up to 38, 40 inches of ice. And so in shallower areas of lakes, you had some scour actually by the ice, and it wiped out that milfoil in that area for a couple of years afterwards. So Little Muskego, we tried the drawdown for freezing out starry stonewort. That was an epic fail, but the epic victory was the milfoil population went way down for a couple of years. So the ice and whether or not there's snow cover on the ice to allow photosynthesis under the ice makes a difference. And the snow covered ice is also potentially problematic for the fishery if it's a shallow water body.
Great questions, everybody. This is a great conversation. Heidi, I have a follow-up question for you. Do you think you're going to see the populations of Eurasian water milfoil change throughout the summer? Is it common to start slow and have it pick up? Or is it pretty much like, does this kind of determine how it goes for this year?
I think in lakes that have a good diversity of native plants, those native plants have really established well. And I think you'll see the milfoil growing among it, but not dominating it. In lakes that are more nutrient rich and species diversity poor, so less native species, depending on what weather patterns we end up getting, you could have a big peak in milfoil later on. So we'll have to see where our weather is. Certainly the weather this spring has been very favorable towards the emergent vegetation out there. I'm getting a lot of complaints about cattails. I'm getting a lot of complaints about lilies, getting complaints even about bulrush. And one lake decided to complain to me about wild rice, which is pretty rare down here. So the emergents are doing well with this weather pattern, and the milfoil, depending on what kind of weather we end up having, could have some spikes in more of the eutrophic water bodies. We'll just have to see what happens. But because the Eladia is doing so well, even in those more nutrient-rich lakes, if the Eladia is well established, it might muscle out a surge in milfoil, and people like Eladia about as much as they like the milfoil. Although I think they hate the coontail more. So it just depends on what is growing there, what's established there, and what happens with the weather. Unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball.
Gotcha. Well, we have about 3 minutes left. I definitely have some more questions for Erik with EDMA, but I want to give everyone else a chance to ask any final questions that they might have. If no one has any, then I'll follow up with Erik. But Oh, Heidi, Nate did share on the chat just to make sure that it's the right
Oh, okay. Let me
publication
look.
for water ordinances. If you want to check that out and just confirm.
I was a little busy chatting.
That's fine. Well, you do that, Eric. Your
Correct.
EDNA. Oh, okay, cool.
Jim, look in the chat. The link is there. You too, Ed.
Cool. And then I want to finish it off. Eric, the eDNA is really impressive and I'm excited about it. It's really cool to hear about. I have a lot of technical questions about it, but I guess my question for you is, do you plan to kind of start implementing that on lakes in Wisconsin, or is it possible to implement on lakes in Wisconsin?
It certainly is. You know, the issue again is funding and time, and whether you can secure some funding to do the analysis. I certainly would like to, at the end of the summer, when we do have that turnover, be able to go out, collect some samples that we could then analyze.
Very cool. Well, it'd be awesome to get you involved with some of our citizen lakes monitoring network, which I'm sure you've already been talking to and getting a hold of. But yeah, it'd be really cool to see some advances in that. I think that'd be really interesting. I'll probably follow up with you with further questions after this because we are right at the hour here at 7:59, so we want to end on time. Heidi, you said it best. This is an awesome group of people on a variety of our lakes and organizations throughout Southeast Wisconsin. So I really appreciate everyone being on these calls. It's awesome to hear from all of you and see all of you. September 17th, hopefully we can see each other in real life and enjoy each other's company. Thanks, Joyce, for sharing that in the chat. She just shared some info about the Clean Water Festival. Yeah, it's just great. I mean, you guys are all such go-getters and such great active people on our lake. You really are like the inspiration for other people on your lake. So please pat yourself on the back a little bit for being here, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot, everybody, for being on the call today.
Thanks, Brad.
I thank you, Brad.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Heidi.
See you on Saturday.
See you on Saturday.
Have a good night, everyone.
You too.
Bye, Heidi.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Yep.
Thanks, Eric. Oh, and I'll stop recording too.